And we're live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. How are you guys doing today? I'm so excited to be back.
I'm so
Yay.
excited. I feel as though we've been away for absolutely ages.
Yes, I know. I mean, we had that, brief stint where we had that one show and everything, but I'm just that was just a special, just a little special. But yeah, I'm really glad to see you and just to be back with the group and just to see everybody. I'm just so glad. It's just this COVID is a mess all
It,
year.
it is, but
So go
nothing
ahead.
we can overcome.
Right.
So, before we get into today's topic, Donnie and I have what we hope is going to be a pretty exciting announcement. So, starting in season 4, we are going to have a book club where
Yay!
we recommend books for you guys to read, and then we will set a date where we chat about them. We chat about the subject of the book, what you thought, what your takeaways were. Um, Pretty much, what a normal online book club would be. And Dania, because this is your idea, did you want to introduce the book?
Yes, that's what I was looking for when you did that. So, the first book that we're going to be reading is called The House of Bondage. Um, Now, no, we not get your mind out the gutter. It's not, it's not a bond, not that kind of thing. But The House of Bondage is by Octavia V. Rogers Albert. And basically, Octavia V. Rogers Albert was born around 1840 something and 45, I believe it was. And she was a teacher. She married a pastor. Um, and around after the Civil War in Louisiana, she did something that the WPA slave narratives say they were the first to do, and that was interview enslaved people about where they were when they were enslaved, what happened, um, their past of what they went through and things like that, the present of what they were going through at that moment, and what they saw for the future as far as African Americans were concerned. Now, this fits with what we're doing this conversation today, because if you ever need to get your mind, body, spirit prepped, this is the book that's going to make you have to do that. Because when I wrote my book, let me tell y'all something. When I wrote my book, I had prepped myself so much that I wasn't even angry like most African Americans are angry when they find their families, or they find out that they have an enslaved ancestor, and or they find out what has gone on with them or things of that nature. I actually wasn't angry. I was kind of shocked that I had found her so quickly, but I wasn't angry. And I actually think that my ancestor Martha was angry that I wasn't angry. So, with that being said, she started pushing me in different directions, and you guys know what I mean by all of that. And she started making me just start to realize, no, you need to be upset, and I'm going to show you why. And she started just giving me stuff. So the first thing she did was she made me know who Preston Brooks was. But then the next thing she did was she made me find this book. And I learned things in this book about what enslaved people went through, that it was just amazing. So this is the first book that we're going to go through. This book can be found online. And because we're doing it like this, because we are having our own little book club, Genealogy Adventures Book Club, you will be able to find this book on the Genealogy Adventures website under the reading room. And
Yep,
it's the, hmm,
we have a brand new reading room
right.
with books that we think will enlighten, inform, also, and give context to parts of American history that's not really covered very, that's not particularly covered at all or covered very well. So for instance, with the House of Bondage, the story of Charlotte Brooks and other enslaved people, Donia said there's a new section called the Reading Room. You'll find the book in there, and you can either read it entirely online, or it's also free to download in a PDF format. And the date that we have set to discuss this book is Sunday, the 24th of January, 2021. So it gives you quite a few months to read it and reread it.
Right. So this is going to prepare you. And the reason why we made that date that far away is because you're going to have to put it down, because it is preparation. It's going to get your mind right. It's not a game, y'all. This book will definitely set you on that path, and you're going to come back to this show. You may even come back to the show on YouTube and be like, okay, what did they say here that I'm supposed to do? Because your mind is just you got to be ready, because you're hearing from the actual enslaved people in their tone, not in that old Negro slave dialect, but what you thought was the old Negro slave dialect. And it's just an eye-opening type book. So we are starting off this season with homework.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of put it into context for me, I had to put the book down 3 times and just kind of walk away.
Yep.
To shake it off.
Yep.
But I'm glad I persisted, and I'm glad I continued reading it, because it gave me a lot of information and it gave me a lot of insight that I could apply to other enslaved ancestors. So yeah, I don't want to say too much more about the book, because it is an awesome book to read. We hope that you guys really like the recommendation, and we hope that you get a lot out of reading the book. So as Danya said, this particular episode is actually really good practice for what you're going to need as you work your way through that book. So today is about getting your mind and your spirit right for researching enslaved people. And I just wanted to have a caveat, because I have been asked this by other people. When we get into genealogy, it's all about discovering the truth, and it's about learning the truth about our ancestors. And in that, there are lots of upsetting things that anyone, regardless of their race or ethnicity, can find. So for instance, as I'm gearing up to research my Jewish ancestors in Eastern Europe, I know I'm going to have to deal with the Holocaust. That is traumatic. As I research my Native American ancestors, they had their trauma during the colonial period, they had their trauma during the Trail of Tears, they had their trauma after the Trail of Tears. So I already know that that's also going to be traumatic research. I'm sure if you're a Spanish-speaking person whose ancestors were always in the southwestern part of the States, or from Florida all the way over to New Mexico, that's going to be trauma. But the reason why I really wanted to make this a very focused conversation on enslavement is, and Danya's going to probably talk more on the other side of this than I am, we're talking about multi-generational trauma that are passed down family lines. So whether you discover that you are a white person who's descended from enslavers, there's going to be some emotion behind that. There's going to be stuff that you're going to have to work through. As Danya was saying just a couple of minutes ago, when you have to sit down and start researching your enslaved ancestors, you're going to come across trauma. You're going to come across unpleasant stories that you're going to have to work out how you're going to handle it, process it, and not let it put you off from continuing to do the research. And then there's a whole third group of people who are descendants of both enslavers and the enslaved. Which is going to be a lot of us. It's me, it's Danya, it's quite a few of you who regularly follow the show. So it's a mixed bag. There's all kinds of things that you can deal with. But there is one that I did want to talk about that I didn't think about when we actually did the show. And Danya and we were working on this last week. So we were trying to find a man by the name of Aaron Hill in Edgefield, South Carolina. Couldn't find him for love nor money. Knew when he was born, knew where he lived, knew who he married, his kids, got them all the way down to living people. When it came to try to find this Aaron Hill in the 1870 census, could not find him for anything. because he changed his last name.
Hmm.
So again, when you're George, and that could be trauma. You grow up thinking, well, I'm a Hill, using this as an example. And we have this throughout our South Carolina family. Yeldels and Harrisons and Quarles and Adams, all kind of changing their names. So you grow up identifying as a name. Those are your people. And then you do a DNA test, and then it's like, well, why am I not related to any Hills? Why am I seeing all of these? Come to find out, his last name that he was born with was Morgan. So if you're growing up as a Hill, you're doing a DNA test expecting to see lots of Hill cousins or cousin matches. No, you're going to probably, you would more than likely see Morgans. And again, it's going to be the same. I can't remember who the Yeldell was, who went from Yeldell to Harrison and all that kind of stuff.
Shepherd.
Shepherd, that was it. So
I
again,
remember.
that kind of falls into what we're talking about today. That kind of jarring revelation of, oh, wait a minute. Then the name that I actually carry isn't my biological name. And again, I get that on my mom's side of the family. They grew up as Turners. Their biological surname is Cone. But we've kind of taken that on the chin and kind of moved on. So Donnie, did you want to talk more about what we were talking about before about not embracing is not the right word, but finding out that you're actually descended from an enslaver? And the emotions that go with that.
Well, okay. As far as the emotions that go with that, see, I didn't have any emotion, and I think that was why my aunt, that I really feel like Martha had an issue with that I didn't have any emotions from it, and that was why she kind of introduced me to the enslaver in a whole nother light. And in introducing me to the enslaver, she also introduced me to other problems or other situations that happened with our enslaved ancestors. And so in doing that, I realized, oh wait, I'm supposed to be upset. And it was really weird. It was really weird because I was not upset at all. Like I was not upset. I'm not ashamed to say that I wasn't upset, but when I tell you guys I prepped myself, I was like, okay, Danya, you getting ready to step into this, you're going to step into this research, and you're going to find endogamy. You're going to find an enslaved person. You're going to find, I just kind of made that list and I just was checking it off. I'm like, you're going to get through all this stuff. So you may as well accept it now because you're going to deal with it later. And that was it. And I just made myself already understand it. Now, what I couldn't get with was the endogamy. It was too much of it. And it took me a long time. I think I still fight with that, the overall endogamy, but there are family members, like I was talking with a family member not too long ago, and her father's last name is Matthews. I haven't told you about this yet. But her dad's last name is Matthews. She's like, oh, we're not related. I'm like, well, I understand that. Now we have on our tree, we have all of them on our tree. And but she does not believe that her father is related or connected. Now we don't have her father as connected yet.
Well, that's because I've only really have touched on about a fraction of the Matthew.
Exactly. But see, that's the thing. We don't have there's this huge. Once Moses Williams came into our lives and Lewis Matthews came into our lives, those 45 and 25 kids and all of their children having double-digit children, there's no way that the majority of the people in Edgefield are not related to each other. It's just impossible. We've received and that we've accepted that, but we have family members that are like, oh, That's your family. Okay.
Yeah, we've always had that with
Right. Then when we
guess,
just sit back.
and I guess what I was thinking of when I was asking the question is I'm thinking about Facebook genealogy groups, and specifically the Black genealogy groups, where there are white genealogists who post, I've recently discovered that I descend from an enslaver. I have records. I don't really know what to do with them. So on the one hand, they're asking for advice, but on the other hand, a lot of what I see is kind of variations of "please don't attack me," for one being descendant of an enslaver,
Right.
but more too that people are going to think badly of them or
Right.
that they're going to be attacked. You've had a flavor of this on your own.
So
African.
you're talking about that particular. Okay. Well, with that particular, Sharon actually chimed in on there as well. We've had some people in one of our groups, in one of our genealogy groups, that are not researchers. And with all of the strife that has been going on, with the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor and the umpteen names that we can name that's been murdered, and the Black Lives Matter, I felt like I needed to post in our group, this is not that kind of group. This is a research only group. And I really had to come to the defense of the other races that are in the group, because these people are to help, and they're there to work through, and they're there to learn as well, because they may have children or grandchildren or husbands or wives that are of African descent. So they're doing this research for them, and they're trying to find out. But you can't be Caucasian and say, hey, I just found out that I'm 15% African. I want to know more. And then get attacked because you want to know more. This is what happened to this one guy. He got attacked, and he shouldn't have. He shouldn't have gotten attacked. He's there to learn. He's there to understand. We have people who actually know that they have to go, and they are looking through their stuff, and they're looking through these wills that they have, and they're seeing our family's names, and like Brian said, they don't know how to put that out there. If I know that I'm about to be attacked, I'm not going to tell you nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. I won't open my mouth. I know every person has always been told by their mom, their grandmother, maybe their dad, or what have you, you get flies with honey before you get it with vinegar. Yes, Black people are the sweetest people in the world. We take everything on a regular basis. We're always forgiving, and this, that, and the third. But sometimes we just have to keep moving forward in order to get what we need and what we want, not just because we're trying to use someone, but the bottom line is, in order for them to get what they're trying to get, they need us. And in order for us to get what we're trying to get, we need them.
Because a good example would be, so say for instance, this person didn't have any African, and that's not why they were asking questions. Say for instance, like I said, they discovered that they were descendant of an enslaver, and they had records that aren't digitized. I think you used the analogy, they were just in a box up in an attic somewhere, and
yeah.
covered. So you can imagine being that person going, I want to do the responsible thing and help. I hope that these documents can help people. Be prepared to release them publicly and then get attacked for that.
Right.
There are going to be people who eventually down the road research, if they're a descendant of his enslaver ancestor, will need those documents.
Right.
Because that person would have gotten such an awful time of it. They're like, you know what? It's just not worth my while. I'm just not going to do anything with it.
Exactly.
Is the thing. Now I can say, from looking at it from the other perspective, I had already, because I knew that a lot of my Black ancestors were going to be enslaved. I kind of, to some extent, mentally prepared myself for it, but kind of abstractly. I'm thinking, well, slavery was never fun. They didn't have a great life. But I never really thought about what was involved in the day-to-day reality of enslaving until I actually started researching my family.
Hmm.
Now, on both of my parents' families, there's not really a history of being sold away or sold outside of families that enslaved them. They did get broken up as, an enslaver died and parceled out their enslaved people to their children and their grandchildren, but they were still kept within the overall family. They were pretty easy, fairly straightforward to find, bar Emily Peterson, because there were just so many Emily Petersons all born around the same time, living next to towns of each other. Um, but it wasn't overtly challenging. I think the first thing that put me off was coming up against an ancestral cousin in Wytheville, Virginia, who got lynched in 1920. That was the first kind of traumatic thing that I think I ever found in my ancestry, and that did my head in. One, it was just a brutal, brutal, awful lynching. It was so bad that Governor Byrd, who was the governor at the time, the following year enacted Virginia's Anti-Lynching Act. Just because the previous 2 years lynching in Virginia had gone off the chain, which I hadn't even realized. I always thought about lynching being kind of in the upper South, like Missouri and those kind of places, maybe Kentucky and Tennessee, and into the deeper South. For some reason, I thought, well, Virginia was a little bit different. It wasn't. Spoiler alert. It was the same kind of state as any other Southern state. Um, but reading the details of how he died and why he died, which was unjust, he didn't deserve it at all. Um, that upset me, and I had to walk away from research for a good couple of months to be able to shake that off because I wasn't expecting it. And ironically, left that research to research some European ancestors who went into Kentucky, only to find out that they got wiped out during a skirmish with indigenous people. So at that point, I'm like, oh, you know what? This is all getting a bit much. But I say that to say one of the ways that I've kind of compensated for that or gotten around it is now I'm working with a group of people like Danya and Loretta and Sharon and so many other people that if I do find something upsetting, like when I found Essex Harrison in Edgefield who got shot for just trying to vote, poor old man, liberated from slavery through the Emancipation Proclamation, looking forward to that. That must have been his second time voting in his lifetime, probably thinking he was never going to be able to vote. Dead, just for registering. That was a tough one, but I was appreciative that I could pick up the phone and have a conversation about how I felt, how angry I was, with Johnny and a couple of other people. And I really value that support network, because I don't think I could do a lot of the research that I do without being able to kind of sound off every once in a while.
Yeah. We want you guys to definitely ask questions, share your stories as far as this is concerned, because it's a real thing, and it's a tragic thing, and it's something that each person has to deal with. I know in one of the genealogy groups that I'm in, it's tragic. Like one of the biggest issues is that when a person doesn't understand what's going on with this whole situation, and so they try to tell you what they were taught in school. Well, we all know that what you were taught in school and what you've actually researched is two different things. And so because it's actually two different things, when they start coming with you and saying, oh, Black people didn't enslave themselves, and they didn't rape themselves. Okay, but we know different. We've actually seen different. Or
you may have to explain that one.
We know that there are some Black people out here who were actually slave owners.
True.
We know that because we're researchers and we found it. And they had people who were overseers who were Black and probably raped those who were doing. I mean, we know these things happen because we were researchers. We are researchers and we see it happening.
Well,
So,
again, even in the course of your research, you did find, and I can't remember if he's not a direct ancestor, but he is a cousin of ours, Enoch Peterson, who actually signed one of the most curious documents that I have ever seen, and this caused all kinds of consternation amongst a group of researchers, but
yes, it did.
You can't deny the phrase that was in that document. This is after slavery had ended, just to make that perfectly clear. I think it was about 5 years afterwards or something
It
around.
was 5 to 10. I think it was more close. I think it was a little bit closer to 10. It was between 5 to 10 years though.
But he is described as an indentured slave. And the reason why he enslaved himself was because he and a group of men wanted to build a church on a specific plot of land. And I can't remember what the relevance of the land was to them, but they didn't have any money. All they had was themselves. So he, using his body, which was the only collateral that he had, he re-enslaved himself under an indentured agreement until the money for the land was paid off to the landholder.
Yep.
I mean, that blew even my mind because I had never even heard of such a thing.
Yeah, he did that. And then, you know, it's so amazing the things that our families have gone through, that they do that in order to move forward. And then I'm not even talking about, let's move to our other families. Let's move to our white side of the family. I need for people to understand, you will not allow, I want you to look at your children and understand that you look at your kids, and when you look at your babies, you do not let them watch scary movies. Why? Because they're gory, because they show things that they're not supposed to show these children, things of that nature. So now that you have that in your mind, picture a little white girl or a little white boy looking at a man or a woman hanging from a tree. Is it not everything that is in a scary movie? Why would you not think that that is not traumatic? Why would you not think that that is not something that's going to carry over later on? That these are all traumas that we've all gone through in one way or another, whether you like it or not, whether you think your trauma is worse than the other or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still a trauma. It's still a PTSD, no matter how you look at it. It's still that. And these are the things that we're talking about when we're saying you have to prepare your mind so that when you start finding all of these different things that are going on, can you imagine the person that was doing the research of that postcard? Because, you know, they sent postcards of the 3 Black men hanging on a tree. And it was children that was there. And then afterwards, they was shooting these men in target practice and taking pieces of their bodies home. These children watched that happen. Now, can you imagine that you found out that one of those children was your ancestor? And you're like, oh my God, my grandmother watched this and she didn't care. It didn't bother her. So, you know, I mean, it's crazy. Now, A.E. Barlow said very few photos show the children smiling as much as the adults. And they're right. Those kids wasn't smiling when that happened. You didn't see a lot of those kids smiling. And if they were smiling, in my opinion, they were fake. They were trying to be into whatever it is, trying to be into whatever it is their family was into, trying to get in, be okay with it. This stuff is real. Like, these traumas are real, and people need to understand that.
And sometimes it's what I call a slow burn accumulation of emotion when you're researching. So you can imagine, for instance, me researching enslaved people held from Captain Samuel Matthews, who is our ancestor, all the way back in Jamestown. So that's multiple generations of our family that were enslaved by the same family. I'm going from Virginia to North Carolina and South Carolina. And I had to break that research off at specific points because it just got to be too much. And it wasn't that I was uncovering anything horrific, like horrific treatment. It was just plotting the disintegration of the enslaved families being spread out between the different enslaving family members who, within a generation or two, start heading down to, taking our enslaved family with them to Louisiana, to Alabama, into Tennessee, into Missouri, into Texas. And it just actually seeing that on a family tree, it just kind of gets to me every once in a while.
Yeah.
Advice would be always give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling, because what you're feeling is valid, and it's who you are. And I think the first time I stopped researching, I felt guilty about not researching, and I'm like, no, I have to walk this off. I have to think about it, process it, do what I have to do to kind of get rid of my feelings, my emotions, and then with a clear head go back into doing that research. But I felt really guilty for not researching for a while. But now I'm just like, listen, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. We had somebody who I don't know if she was leaving a recommendation for the show, or if she was sharing a particular show, but I came across it, on the page manager site. And at first glance, I laughed at what she said. But thinking about this show, I had to like rethink what she said. She actually came off and she said, she said in so many words, she was like, yeah, I'm a descendant of the a-holes of America, of the first a-holes of America. I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, wow. But she was upset. She was angry. She was mad because they had done things that she did not like, that she did not approve of, that just really hurt her feelings. And she's like, this is not who I am, but I have to accept that this is what they did. So now I have to do my part and, do whatever. But at first glance, I laughed. I was like, she did that. It was an awesome write-up what she did, because she was giving us a big talking about how you and I, what we do, and how it helps from the beginners to the well-known, as she put it, geek genealogists. But overall, she was upset. She called them who they were to her, but that's who they were to her. And this was a white woman. And she was like, when I think about it now, I know she was really upset. And that was her way of showing that she was angry at what they did. So I need for people of color, no matter what color, red, black, brown, all of us, we need to understand, and I need for non-people of color to understand that we all have some type of anxiety from all of this that has gone on. If we recognize this overall anxiety, we'll be able to deal with it better. Because truth be told, digging into the Black Lives Matter thing, this is why Black Lives Matter because of this anxiety that is constant. It's here. This is why all of this is where it is today, because one person doesn't believe that this is happening, or so on and so forth, or vice versa, or however you want to have, you're not listening, you're not hearing me, all of that. If it makes sense. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. I'm getting it.
Yeah, I mean.
So by all means, come up with your suggestions. For those of you listening at home, come up with your suggestions too. One way that you may prepare yourself for this, part of getting your mind and spirit right, try to create an online community. And I don't mean Facebook groups or posts. It could be a Zoom conference call, or speaking, FaceTime on your tablet or whatever. Think about 3 to 5 people that you know really well, that you can trust implicitly, and you can just say what you want. You just say what you need to say, because sometimes you just need to talk it out. If you want to cry, you can cry. If you want to yell, you can yell. These are people you know you can trust.
Right.
And when you come up with something really difficult that you need to get off your chest, or you want to share, you kind of want to talk through your feelings, that's your go-to group of people. Like I said, I'm blessed that I have 5 or 6. That I know that when I actually hit that kind of a thing, I can go to them, and I can have the conversation that I need to have. And I really value that. But as I said, I wouldn't suggest doing it in a Facebook group, not even a closed Facebook group, because you're going to be really opening yourself up and really talking about deeply personal. Because the reason why it affects us is it touches something in us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it gets really difficult for me, because I've always treated the names in my tree, the people in my tree, as people who were living, and I've always thought about them as being 3-dimensional, living, breathing human beings with all the drives and hopes and fears and desires that we have today. So when I do come across something really upsetting, it really, really hits me on that level.
Right.
And the more that I research them, the more I come to find out about I get it. I wouldn't say that I found out about them, but I get a sense of their character, what made them them, what made Martha Brooks completely different than Rebecca Buck.
Right.
Both of them were strong. You get a sense that both of them were very strong women who didn't hold any cut cards and didn't tolerate any foolishness. But Rebecca was one kind of a woman, and Martha was a different kind of woman. Both equally strong, but I think that they expressed their strengths in different ways. And it's only through researching them as much as I have done that I've come to feel that about them. Like I can almost feel about how Martha would respond to a certain situation, and equally feel comfortable feeling what Rebecca would have felt. So that's just one example. And again, doing the work that I'm doing with the Weeping Time people, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that history, Weeping Time, Georgia sale in Savannah, 1859, 440 human beings sold, here, there, and everywhere. So the rewarding part of that research is finding the living descendants for a growing number of the people who were sold, as well as the people who were left behind on the Butler Plantation in Georgia. Now, the really emotional part, not that the sale wasn't emotional, but the really emotional part is actually taking that story back further. And I've actually taken it on a couple of those lines back another 3 or 4 generations. And the painful bit with me, which I've shared with fellow researcher Martine Brennan, was knowing the fate that was going to befall their descendants within 3 or 4 generations. So I'm reading about old Sylvie. I know who old Sylvie was, and I'm like, ooh, if you only knew what was going to happen to your great-grandchild in 1859, I bet you anything you would have sailed away with the British when you had the chance in 1815. You would have given anything. So it's kind of knowing what's going to happen, but also knowing what's happening to them during their lifetime. It's just stuff like that I found really painful. But appreciative that I can kind of talk about that with my research group and share that. So I don't know, I mean, do you have any suggestions about forming groups or ways that people can build a support system to get that kind of support?
I agree with what you're saying. Definitely have someone that you can trust, that you can, like you and Loretta and Hamad, and when Sheila was around, my Sheila, you guys have been just that sounding board for me and Charles, as far as all of that is concerned, because with the stuff as far as the Yelldale line and how stressful the Yelldale line was, and then the fact that we would come across people, and I guess with Moses, when we came across Moses, and I found the article talking about him and the 45 kids, but then you turned around and you found the obituary, and I'm looking at that obituary and I'm looking at those dates, and I was confused, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, the Moses that we're talking about was born in 1791. That's not him. And you were like, yeah, that's his father. Oh no, I'm not doing that. Oh no, you're kidding me. It just made me want to pull my hair out. Like, you guys are such a go-to for me. Right now, this break that I finally had to take, it took years for me to take this break. And I think I've taken this break it's been almost a year now, right? And you guys let me take it. You guys let me take this break, but you keep me informed. And sometimes I'll jump in, I'll help with something, but you let me come right back out of it when I need to, because it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Everything about the researching your family can be so overwhelming. So to have somebody to be like, here, here, to be able to push it off to somebody is just amazing. And if you don't have somebody to push it off to, it's crazy.
And again, the other thing that is going to make you feel one way or another, and it's what I call the creeping emotion. Researching enslaved ancestors in particular is difficult. It's challenging. It's not impossible. I get really tired. And bless you, Shelley, for calling out someone on Facebook for saying that Black genealogy was impossible. It isn't impossible. It's difficult and it's challenging. And sometimes many times I'm resentful because it's needlessly difficult and challenging.
Yes.
Because we just don't have the standard set of records to work with. There are no births. Well, I shouldn't say that. Every once in a while, you'll get lucky, specifically in Virginia in the early colonial period. But other than that, there doesn't tend to be a birth certificate. If you're lucky and you can find an enslaver's farm book or farm journal, you get a birth entry or a death entry. But other than that, there's no death certificate, there's no birth certificate, there's no marriage certificate, there's no baptism certificate. And you really have to develop a skill set that allows you to use critical thinking and thinking outside of the box to try to think, well, what kind of records would there be for my enslaved ancestor that I have already tried to find, but doesn't seem to exist? The state inventories got burnt when the county courthouse caught on fire. The wills have been lost. And again, that's where I really appreciate my group of core researchers around me to say, listen, Loretta, Hamad, Sharon, Martine, Dania, I've tried finding this, and this, and this, and this, and I've looked here and there and everywhere. Can you think of anything that I may have overlooked? And you guys are always game. Well, it's like, well, let's go back and, maybe let's look at this again, or let's look at this again, or have you thought about looking at this repository or on this website? And I'll be like, no, never thought about that. Because you can't think of everything.
All right.
You can't, no matter how long you've been in this game, you can't think of everything. And again, that's where the support group is really helpful. And anyone who does this research knows how difficult it is, know how frustrating it can be from time to time.
Yeah.
And it's just good to have those conversations, and it's good to get that off of our chests and not kind of carry that with us.
Yeah. I think that as far as having somebody to bounce stuff off of is definitely necessary, and knowing when to take a break.
Yes.
You have to know when to take a break. You have to know when to stop, when to back down, when to back away.
Even when your ancestors are popping into your dreams, tugging on your clothes, doing everything they can to get your attention, you have to go, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, Martha. I need to take a time out.
I mean, for us as genealogists, as researchers, as family historians, whatever you want to call yourself, however you died, that you put yourself under, we know that we're not crazy, but we know that these things happen. So that moment when I was doing my research on my great grandmother, I was doing my research on Martha Brooks, and I got so into her. For a little while, my great grandmother, Mom Lula Peterson, she let it happen. She was like, okay, you go ahead, because they don't know anything about that Yelldale line. So I'm gonna let you have that. I'm gonna let you do that, and I'm gonna let you go in and do it. But after a while, I lied to y'all not. Every time I thought I was finding something on the Yelldales, it was falling right back to them Petersons. Bow. And then it would do it again. Bam. Peterson. Nope, that's a Peterson. Boom. I'm like, okay. All right, so maybe I need to go ahead and look at these Petersons. And I would go and I'm looking at the Petersons, but then what happens? Martha steps in. No, you looking at this. I swear to you guys, I had to close my door, told my children, look, I ain't crazy. I just need to close my door for a minute. And I had to close my door, cut all the lights out in my room, and just kind of talk out into the air and be like, listen, y'all gonna get out my head. Y'all gonna leave me alone, or I will shut everybody out. I'll shut the whole monster down. And we won't do nothing else. That's it.
Oh, it's funny. We have A.E. Barlow going, tugging on his shirt. He's like, no, bruh. I'm like,
nah, right?
I am not exaggerating.
Nope.
At the point where I had to walk away for a little bit, doing some research. And that ancestor in particular was so adamant that I not stop. I know this is going to sound nuts, but I have what you call the talent. I switched it off, closed myself down. She was tugging on my shirt.
Yeah. I've had clothes moved. You know how you got suits, and so you hang your suit together. I had a dress suit where the suit had a jacket, and it was hanging up in my closet. And then all of a sudden, the jacket was on one hanger, and the suit, the dress was on another. I was like, what y'all not gonna do is play with my clothes. That was that day. There was all in that one day. That was the day I closed my door and I said, you're gonna stop, because I will shut the whole monster down. I will close that spiritual door and never open it up again. I will never open it up.
I had lights being turned on and off. My Fire TV, which had never had a problem before, she was like, you're not watching TV. All of a sudden, fires. I'm like, you don't leave me alone.
Yeah, it sounds crazy. To the point where my own children, my older son, because my daughter's the oldest, my daughter's 27, and I have a 24-year-old. He doesn't live here. He has called me and said, could you tell your family to leave me alone? And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're changing my chat. They're cutting the radio on, and the remote is sitting right beside me. Mom, not touching the remote. I'm telling y'all, when I tell y'all this was all the same day, Jackie's laughing because she know. And, but it was all, that was the exact same day that I just kind of, I mean, keys were being, they were determined. Those two women, they were fighting. They were fighting. They were like, you're gonna do this.
But funnily enough, do you know what the worst of it was about? That was right before I realized that Peter Peterson's wife, Violet, was Violet Williams, the daughter of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all that activity was actually trying to push me to realize. But, you know, again, we have to accept our own limitations. I
Right.
kind of do when I'm ready for the big reveal and when I'm not ready for the big reveal. And I'd already finished doing something so challenging and a really horrible history involving the Harrisons. I wasn't ready for that. I
Right.
wasn't ready for Violet being a Williams. I wasn't ready to find out that Moses Williams Sr. had 45 kids. That was huge. That
Yeah.
was a huge, that paragraph in that 1884 newspaper about Moses Williams. It was just one paragraph.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Yeah.
And not huge in a negative way. Trying to find all 45 of his kids can be challenging and make me feel some kind of way some days.
That I'm still mad at Brian about, but nevertheless, nevertheless, that's a whole another story. It's another day.
Because again, that's something that you have to prepare yourself for.
Right.
Especially, if you find out that an ancestor was a breeder or had just loads of kids.
Right.
When you realize what's involved in tracing trying to identify all of those kids and then trying to research their descendants and realize how crazy the endogeny is down those lines. Yeah, that's a lot of info to absorb and process and kind of work your way through.
And to the point where you have to sit back, you have to stop, yeah. you have to just break. And I mean, we're going to be here for you when you're ready to stop, because you haven't broke yet. You haven't broke yet.
Just remember, because you immediately resisted, as did another cousin. You guys, both of you were like, I'm not going to try to find 45 kids. But what we agreed was, look, this is huge. Let's just come back to this in a couple of weeks, because I needed to kind of figure out how we were even going to tackle that kind of a monster. But remember, that's what we agreed. Let's get our working group together. Let's identify the kind of records we're going to need to find. But let's take a break. Let's just mentally prepare ourselves for this monster of a research project.
Right.
And we picked it up. And look at how much information we found and how quickly we initially found what we were looking for.
Right.
I mean, we still have more kids to go. We know we have more kids to go.
And we just recently found, more kids. So with that new Hey Good stuff and everything, we found Mom. Well, we have an idea of where Mom is. We have a name for her. Well, a last name now. So, yeah. But we are at a 2-minute mark.
Okay.
So
again, just to remind everyone, book club, it's called House of Bondage. It's nothing dodgy. It's just House of Bondage, Charlotte Brooks and other enslaved people by Octavia Rogers. That is in our reading room. It is a link that you can either read the book online or you can download the PDF and read it on your preferred kind of digital device. When it comes to getting your mind and spirit right with difficult enslaved research, again, just be prepared. You're going to be feeling all kinds of feelings, from joy and laughter to sorrow and anger and frustration and all the rest of it. Work out. You haven't really, started really digging into your tree, how you're going to process those emotions, what you're going to do with it, but even better, creating an online kind of, not even an online, just creating a support group.
Right.
That you can go to when the research becomes difficult, painful, challenging, whatever.
Right. So, and if you want to purchase the book, you can find it on Amazon, and it's $7. It's like $7.95 or something, like $7 or $8. It's not an expensive book. It is probably one of the best books that I've read, because the main thing about it is that the WPA slave narratives say they were the first to do it. They were not. This book was originally written in 1890. That's the great thing about it. So this was right after slavery. But again, we'll put the link. You will be able to find the book in our website reading room. There is a tab for that, but we will place the link in this site. We are happy to be back. We have a wonderful lineup for you guys this season. So, just be ready and be prepared, because we have a great lineup. So just watch out for it.
So speaking of which, next week in episode 2 is the Slave Voyages Project with, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Nafis Khan. So it's the Slave Voyages Project, which is an awesome project with Nafis Khan, and that's right here, Genealogy Adventures, Sunday, 4 o'clock next week.
That's right. So we'll see you guys Sunday.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.